By a show of hands, when you were younger, how many times did you go somewhere that you probably shouldn't have? Did you ever go into the strange woods that your parents told you not to and find something that wasn't supposed to be found? That was the fate for 4 local boys in 1943 who were harmlessly but illegally bird nesting in Hagley Woods. Part of a large estate that belonged to Lord Cobham, the boys knew that they shouldn't have been there, but it was a great spot to search for bird nests. One of the young lads, called Bob Farmer, climbed up the side of a large wych elm tree to see if there were any undisturbed bird nests at the top. But when he looked down, he discovered something far, far worse. He had no idea when he woke up that morning that his name would be tied to one of the strangest, unsolved, countrywide cult conspiracy phenomena that somehow also involves the Nazis and witchcraft. That's a big day. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is William and welcome to the Baker Street Bureau, the place where we dive into the strange, dark and mysterious goings-on in British history. And if that's your thing, all I ask is that you click the free subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Now, the aspiring YouTuber waffle is out of the way. It's time to go down the rabbit hole and attempt to answer a question that has been graffitied on the walls of Britain for over 80 years. Who put Bella in the wych elm? All the weird things that happen in Great Britain tend to go down in cute little villages, and this is no exception. The village of Hagley, found in the county of Worcestershire. Yes, my American friends, that's how you say that. Ignore how it's written and say it with me. Worcestershire. Within Hagley is a large patch of ancient woodland known to the locals as Hagley Wood. On a beautiful spring day in April, with the sun beginning to creep from the clouds and t-shirt weather officially returning to rural England, 4 local boys decided that it was a fine opportunity for a bit of poaching. You see, bird nesting was a common pastime in England, where people would seek out eggs in the trees and basically steal them. A quiet, out-of-the-way and dense woodland setting would make this perfect for such a task, which is what made Hagley Woods such an excellent location. Robert Hart, Thomas Willets, Bob Farmer and Fred Payne were all going about their business, poaching on private property, when they came across a very large and very beautiful tree known as a wych elm. Under the assumption that the tree would be the perfect place for a bird nest discovery, Bob Farmer was sent to climb up and have a little look. As he climbed, he glanced down into the tree's hollow trunk and saw something that caught his eye. At first, he thought it to be the skull of an animal, but upon further inspection, he saw human hair, a jawline, and teeth. They were on the land illegally, as Hagley Woods was part of the estate owned by Lord Cobham, which put the boys in a really sticky situation. In order to report the finding, they would need to admit that they were trespassing, so regardless of the outcome, they would risk getting themselves in trouble. A situation that I'm sure absolutely none of us have ever been in before. Even though it feels like a lifetime ago now, I can completely empathize with the boys' hesitancy. The decision was made to put the skull back and forget about it. However, upon returning home, the eldest of the boys, Thomas Willets, had a really horrible feeling in his stomach and decided to tell his parents. His parents rightfully informed the police, and constables attended the scene. Within the tree, they found an almost complete skeleton with a shoe, a gold wedding ring, and some small pieces of clothing. The skull was very important evidence, as it still had a few wisps of hair and a very clear dental pattern, something that we all know is used by a lot of modern forensics to identify people. The weird thing about the discovery, apart from the obvious there being a skeleton in a tree, was the fact that it was missing one of its hands. Upon further investigation, officers found the remaining hand some distance from the tree under a patch of disturbed earth. Now, things are getting interesting. Why was the hand removed, and why was it buried a distance away from the tree? There are theories, but I will get into that in a little bit. The body was sent for a forensic examination, and a chap called James Webster took up the task. He quickly established that the body was female. It had been dead for at least 18 months, placing the time of death somewhere around October the previous year. He determined that the woman was between 35 and 40 years old, about 5 foot tall, and had given birth to at least one child. Webster discovered a small piece of silken fabric locked between the teeth, which could either mean that she died from suffocation or it was used as a gag. He also claimed that the body could not have been placed in the tree trunk too long after death, as the trunk was too narrow. The positioning of the body would have been impossible. See, after someone dies, they enter a process called rigor mortis. One of the first stages of rigor mortis that happens within the first few hours is the freezing or stiffening of limbs. We spoke very briefly about this in the spy in the bathtub conspiracy. With that in mind, Webster was convinced that the unknown victim must have only just met their end before being placed inside the narrow wych elm. It also doesn't rule out the fact that she could still have been alive, but in an incredibly bad way or potentially unconscious. The police drew some assumptions based on the items found with the body, what she could have potentially looked like. However, record keeping during the Second World War was so bad, and with so many people going missing, that a proper identification was like finding a needle in a haystack. They cross-referenced the details that they had with missing persons reports across the region, but nothing seemed to match the list of evidence that they had. Police also contacted dentists all over the country to see if they could help match up the remaining teeth, but all of their efforts were unsuccessful. So what does that leave us with? The skeletal remains of a woman that is missing a hand, found 18 months after dying with some of her items still on her person, and a piece of cloth found clamped in her mouth. None of the evidence lines up with missing person reports, and none of the dentists in the country could line up dental records. It's all just a bit odd, isn't it? The investigation was widely publicized due to its abnormality, and the press started referring to it as the tree murder riddle. Everything had fallen quiet, as the investigation had brick wall after brick wall, until something really strange happened. Graffiti started popping up throughout the region. The first instance read, "Who put Lou Bella down the Wych Elm Hagley Wood?" which was found at Hayden Hill Road, followed shortly by "Who put Bella down the Wych Elm Hagley Wood?" That was found on a wall in Upper Dean Street in Birmingham. Police began frantically searching for the culprits. Clearly, they knew something that the police didn't. The boys who found the body were rightly questioned. However, it was determined that the boys were actually too short to do the graffiti, so they were ruled out. Up until this point, no formal identification had been made and no names had been released. Someone, or multiple people, seemed to be convinced that the unknown woman in the wych elm was called Bella. The police were unsurprisingly unsuccessful in finding the culprit, and from that point onwards, the mysterious woman was referred to as Bella. They were stumped, and the trail went cold. But the theories, oh boy, the theories. There are a lot of theories revolving around Bella, and some of them are absolutely wild. 2 years after Bella's body was discovered, a woman called Margaret Murray, who was an anthropologist and archaeologist from the University College London, proposed that Bella had been executed during an occult ceremony and her hand was removed to be used as something called a hand of glory. A hand of glory was a dismembered hand used by burglars as a candle that was carried into homes that they wanted to steal from in order to make the inhabitants fall asleep. The problem with this theory was that a hand of glory had to be cut from the body of a criminal that had been hung from the gallows. Murray also believed that she saw witches everywhere, and she wrote several books on witchcraft, so clearly her expertise in the matter was a little hubble bubble toil and trouble. She claimed that Bella was linked to the murder of a man named Charles Walton, who was killed by a pitchfork in another seemingly ritualistic killing. Her ideas seemed to revolve around another theory that suggested that Bella had been killed by Romany gypsies during an occult ritual. Now, that doesn't seem too far-fetched, as she was found with the possessions and a suspected gag in her mouth, and her hand was buried separately. If witchcraft wasn't enough, here come the Nazis. That is a sentence I never thought I would say. The last man to be put to death in the Tower of London was a man called Joseph Jacobs. Within the MI5 declassified file, it claims that Jacobs, who was a Nazi spy, had parachuted into Cambridgeshire in 1941, but had broken his ankle upon landing and was soon apprehended by the Home Guard. Upon his person was a photograph of his lover, a German cabaret singer named Clara. Jacobs said that she was being trained as a spy, and that had he made contact, she might have been sent over to England after him. However, there was no evidence to suggest that she was parachuted into England, and several witnesses described that she was around 6 feet tall. Another spy theory emerged in the 1950s that claimed the victim was a Dutch woman called Clara Bella Dronkers, and that she had been killed by a German spy ring for knowing too much. In 1953, a woman admitted to the police that her ex-husband, Jack Mossop, had confessed to family members that he and a friend of his had put a woman in the tree. Mossop and his friend met for a drink at the local pub, and later that night, a woman became drunk and passed out while they were driving her home. The men put her in a hollow tree in the woods in the hope that she would wake up in the morning so frightened she would see the error of her ways. Mr. Mossop was sent to a mental hospital due to a reoccurring dream of a woman staring out at him from a tree. He died long before the body was found in the Wych Elm, so the likelihood of this being accurate was quite low because the timeline is pretty skewed. Now, the most logical and simple explanation to all of this. A local sex worker who disappeared 3 years prior to the discovery of the body. Her name was Lou Bella. After the police published their case files and officially closed the investigation, Bella's bones mysteriously disappeared. The remains had been sent to the University of Birmingham for some unofficial tests, but then there are no records as to what happened to them after this. Naturally, this stirs the pot as some sort of cover-up or conspiracy was afoot. The case has all the fanatical hallmarks of a British classic, with graffiti continuing to pop up in random places throughout the country over the years, with the latest appearing as recently as 2020. The case went on to spawn books, plays, TV shows over the years, with cultural references creeping up in a lot of places, all centered around the unresolved mystery. One thing is for certain, someone put Bella in the Wych Elm, and we will all likely die without finding out why. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is William, and this is the Baker Street Bureau, the place where we dive into the strange, dark, and mysterious goings-on in British history. I hope you enjoyed this video enough to motivate you to subscribe and click the like button. If you've got any cool ideas for things that you might like me to look into, please leave a comment. I promise you I will read it, and if it's cool, I'll add it to my list. But for now, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.